Hey guys, welcome back to my bedroom. Today we are going to be doing an Alcoholics Anonymous focused video. I want to talk about the structure of the meetings and how the structure of the meetings can actually be harmful for recovery. I know that's a hot take to have on something that's intended to support recovery, and that a lot of people will disagree with me. That's entirely okay. I'm definitely not an outlier though. And I can assure you that the structure of the meetings contributes to the commitment rate of 5 to 8%. So if you've never experienced an AA meeting, there are 4 kinds of meetings and they're kind of split in 2. So there's open meetings and closed meetings, and there is speaker meetings and discussion meetings. So open meetings, anybody can come to. You can come and listen, you can support your loved one. You are perfectly welcome to come, sit. You don't have to participate, but you can listen. A lot of speaker meetings tend to be open meetings. And then closed meetings are where the group asks that only alcoholics join. I've never seen anybody turned away from these groups, so I've definitely been in closed groups where somebody has somebody there to support them, but it is encouraged and recommended that only alcoholics come to these meetings. Most of the meetings that I attended ranged from about 15 to 40 people, but events and larger city speaker meetings can definitely fill up into the hundreds. One thing AA is really good at is fostering community, which you're going to find among any religious organization or institution. So the other 2 kinds of meetings are speaker meetings and discussion meetings. The structure of the meeting begins the same way for both. The hall is set up with chairs that face a main table where the opener of the meeting or the host of the meeting will sit. Most of the time people will arrive early and mingle before the start of the meeting. So when it's called, everyone will take their seats and the meeting leader will start the meeting with the same thing for almost every meeting. So meetings begin with the preamble, the 12 steps and 12 traditions, and an introduction or roll call of the members that are there, especially for smaller groups. Within the first 5 to 10 minutes of meetings, when you do have a roll call, indoctrination begins right away. You're expected to introduce yourself by saying your name and following that with "I'm an alcoholic." People with years of sobriety who have not had alcohol in over decades still introduce themselves in meetings as, "Hi, my name is so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic." And this has never made sense to me. After introductions are done, a collection plate is passed around the group for the 7th tradition, which asks you to contribute financially to the program. And then the chip presentation is held. Any newcomers to the meeting are encouraged to go up to the front of the meeting and receive a 24-hour or a dedication chip that I talked about in my relapse video. And it's a physical symbol of belonging to something. It's a way to solidify somebody's feeling of belonging within the program, especially in early sobriety. Once everybody says the Serenity Prayer together in unison, the meetings will then start to look a little bit different based on what meeting you've attended. So first we'll talk about speaker meetings. So in speaker meetings, we would all stay as a group, and somebody who is often from a separate group, this isn't their home group, will go up to the front of the hall and will spend the next hour or so telling their story. They often tend to tell the most tantalizing and engaging stories from their drinking in order to engage the audience and to show how much of a climb they've made into sobriety and recovery. I'm not suggesting that that isn't a lot of work, but often this is spoken about in a way that gives the responsibility for their recovery entirely over to the AA program and not to their own hard work. After the speaker finishes, the group closes by standing in a circle, holding hands, and reciting the Lord's Prayer, which is a Christian prayer. Often you'll find that at the end of meetings, people are sticking around for coffee or for cigarettes in the parking lot and chatting and mingling, and that's really where fellowship and connection happens. These meetings weren't nearly as triggering as discussion meetings, and they were also a lot easier to bail out of if need be, earlier and without being noticed. Most speaker meetings tended to be a little bit shorter and really were only there to provide a space to feel less alone and to understand that you are not the only person experiencing this. There's no productive work towards recovery done in these meetings. It's really just a space to share your story without judgment and to feel safe in a community. And that's super great. That's awesome. If you can find a space to non-judgmentally talk about your experiences, that can be incredibly helpful. There are spaces out there that are not God faith focused, like Smart Recovery or group therapy. But if that works for you, this is really good meetings for early sobriety to hear stories of other people's experiences. From my experience, you do need to have a full year of sobriety and group participation in order to be asked to speak at any meetings. So it's not like you can share your story anytime you need to. You do kind of have to wait to follow the protocols and policies of whatever meeting you're attending. Then there are discussion meetings. These ones tend to be a lot more triggering. They could be focused around a certain 12th step or 12th tradition. It might be a big book chapter study, or it could be more generic, where the group is just discussing a certain phrase or word around alcoholism. So like fear or relapse or family, for example. If the group has a larger amount of members, often they'll split into factions and they'll give members the choice of where they want to go for each of these things. So there might be a step 1 discussion group, and there might be a big book study discussion group, and there might be a 7th tradition study group. And they're all within the same meeting, and they'll all return back at the end as well. So far, I can imagine what you're thinking. This doesn't really sound bad, and I don't see where the harm is. If someone in early sobriety can benefit from group support and from discussion about recovery, where is the problem here? My next video is going to cover the entire topic of connection in sobriety and the ways that AA does it well and not well. But the intention of these meetings is not to foster connection between the members. It's not intended to offer support or advice or communication. Instead, what these meetings aim to do is reinforce the fear of alcoholism and strengthen your dependency on the group. I know that's kind of intense, so let me explain why I think that. Alcoholics Anonymous has a few strict rules to follow when you're in discussion meetings, and these are no crosstalk and discussion about members' shares, stick to alcohol-related sharing only, and don't offer advice to people. Let's just sit with that for a minute and let it marinate. No crosstalk and discussion, alcohol only, and no advice given. Now let me offer you a possible scenario. A woman has 11 years of sobriety and absolutely no desire to drink, but then her parent passes away and she slips into depression. Her support system is the AA group she attends, and she feels connected to them. But she knows that her current problems have nothing to do with drinking. So she isn't sure that she can share them with the group. She tries to explain her fears and relates them back to the 12-step program, but when she finishes her share, the room is silent. The table is silent. Nobody is supposed to offer feedback or commentary or advice on her deeply vulnerable share, and she's left to just sit with being emotionally open and have no feedback in return. All that we're supposed to say in response to her opening herself up to us is thanks for sharing. After the meeting, she might be able to talk with some people and connect with someone one-on-one, but not for very long, because they do close the church up pretty quickly after meetings, and not everybody has the time or dedication to spend 20 minutes in the parking lot after an hour-and-a-half long meeting. Here's another one for you. A new member comes into the meeting because someone close to them recommends it. They get through the beginning of the meeting, and then they split off into groups, and they go to a step 1 group. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. The new person listens for a while and then finds the nerve to share. They explain that they don't think that they have a problem and that they think they can manage and that they're here for insert circumstance, but that they aren't really that bad and this isn't needed. They finish their share to be met with silence and a thanks for sharing. After the meeting, they might be approached by a member who will use one of AA's notoriously bad sayings to convince them to stay into the meeting, often using fear and manipulation. One of the most common things that I heard members tell new interested members was, if you don't think you have a problem, go ahead and go out and try again. And to me, that is absolutely disgusting, and it is playing with people's lives and saying, if you don't think that this is the right recovery system for you, go gamble your life away with alcohol. And I can't get past that. I was in conversation with an AA member once, and I asked if they could see the potential for how meetings could be harmful for recovery. And they said that they couldn't. I get that. It's very hard to see the negative consequences to something that has provided you value and assistance. I challenged that by asking if they agreed that some of the meetings could be overwhelming and trigger cravings, to which they agreed to that. My point then stands that causing an increase for cravings and overwhelming triggers can be harmful for some people's recovery, especially in early sobriety. More than just being emotionally overwhelming though, these guidelines for discussion can create some really challenging to navigate situations. Discussion meetings focused on alcohol-related issues and abstinence and drinking tend to keep alcohol and relapse right at the forefront of your life and right there in the center, cementing the idea that the problem we have is alcohol-based, when in reality it's so much more nuanced and complicated and individual than that. Keeping discussions alcohol or big book focused leaves no space or room in these meetings to discuss trauma or to discuss mental health issues or to discuss just the struggles of living day to day that have nothing to do with drinking. It never made sense to me why they only focused on not drinking alcohol, even people who had years and years of sobriety time. The issue is clearly no longer alcohol if you haven't touched the stuff in over a decade. Why are you talking like it is? If you're attending meetings every week or every day for years and years and years, and the idea of drinking and relapse are always talked about and discussed, it's always going to be in the forefront of your mind, and it's very easy to convince yourself that you might still have that problem years down the line. I don't have a drinking problem now. I'm not drinking. If I started to drink again, I would, but I don't right now. Listen, I still struggle with the idea of drinking to blackout sometimes, but it's by no means the center focus of my life. 2 years out, I have actually no desire to drink for the sake of drinking, and alcohol plays a very tiny role in my life. Meetings can be really triggering, especially if you find yourself in one that's glorifying or glamorizing the idea of drinking and the experiences that somebody had in their past. Another way that meetings can be incredibly harmful or triggering is the members' approach to new potentials. I'll discuss this more in a video later, but most often you'll find that potential members are greeted with a lot of love and support and welcoming and come into our circle. They're told, probably for the first time in years, that they're where they belong. This sounds wonderful and is exactly the kind of support that a new sober person needs. The problem comes as soon as new potential members discuss that they don't like the program, or they don't think it's right for them, or that they don't need it, and they try to leave. If a new potential member suggests that this program is not going to work for them, an immediate shift in approach is seen. I literally can't tell you how many times I heard members use that phrase, if you don't think you have a problem, go out and try again. Or they say things like, if you don't stay with us, you'll end up dead, in jail, or in an institution. It's fear-based manipulation. AA is a voluntary program for the most part, and you're free to come and go as you choose. It's not open to interpretation though. Their goal is fellowship to the AA program. And as a community based up of former addicts, they can be masters at fear and manipulation tactics. So separate from the 12-step program, the meeting structure can also be very harmful for potential members and recovering addicts. It can provide a toxic and manipulative environment, and it can open you up to triggering stories and glorifying drinking and alcohol. There's no feedback or recovery progress within the meetings, and it is intentionally designed for indoctrination. Meetings is where the AA program can exist and thrive, because the 12 steps are supposed to be worked on independently and on your own. So they need the meetings to have this space for members to come together and form this fellowship and connection. Without meetings, there would be no program. While they try to be inclusive and respectful, the guidelines to follow in meetings tend to lead towards a lot of vulnerable emotional release and no feedback and no follow-up. The importance of indoctrination into the meetings is seen in phrases like 90 meetings in 90 days. You're supposed to go early and stay late and help with coffee. It's supposed to become this huge part of your life. In my opinion, if you're looking for community and connection in recovery and you're not faith-based or religious-based, I think you're better off looking at group counseling or finding a hobby that isn't alcohol related, like yoga or painting. I think if you want to share yourself vulnerably to people who might understand you in a safe space, the meetings might be a good spot for you. But if you aren't looking to be judged and you're looking to have feedback and advice given to you, look into professional counseling. It's going to be a lot better. And that's my opinion. So that's the kind of structure of the meetings and how I think personally that they're not helpful, but necessary for the AA program to exist. Next week, we're going to be talking about connection and how connection is really important, and the different ways to approach it in addiction. So I will see you next Wednesday. Bye. After the speaker finishes, the group finishes. More than just being overwhelming. More than just being